The world froze as headlines flashed. Breaking. Chinese fighter makes emergency landing on U.S. carrier. In the South China Sea, the USS George Washington became the center of a global crisis. As dawn broke, an unidentified aircraft raced toward the carrier, shattering the morning calm. A faint blip appeared on radar. No identification. Tension spiked as the dot grew larger. Captain Reynolds was summoned to the bridge. This was no drill. The crew braced for the unknown. The impossible was happening, and the next move would change everything. Just moments before the alarm, the USS George Washington was a picture of disciplined routine. The vast Pacific stretched out in every direction, a deep blue canvas. On the flight deck, sailors checked lines and catapults, a ballet of man and machine. Every sailor knew their role. Every action was precise. Down in the CIC, the atmosphere was subdued, focused. The young radar operator tracked fishing vessels and a distant cargo ship. Suddenly, the unidentified blip appeared, moving at over 500 knots. He reported it calmly, but his heart raced. On the bridge, Captain Reynolds sipped his coffee, watching his escorts on the horizon. The conversation was light, the sea calm, the sky clear. The transition from peace to crisis was shockingly fast. A single call from the CIC unidentified aircraft, inbound, fast mover. The relaxed atmosphere vanished, coffee cups set down, officers turned to their consoles, the ship's muscles began to tense. The ballet on the flight deck was about to be interrupted. The giant, sleeping beast was beginning to wake up. The first quiet alert sounded. The calm was over. The storm was coming. The voice over the 1MC was calm but firm. Set condition 2. This is not a drill. Instantly, the ship snapped to heightened alert. Hatches were dogged down, sailors sprinted to battle stations. On the flight deck, yellow shirts cleared the landing area, red shirts secured weapons. The sense of a normal day was gone. Now, there was only one mission: defend the ship. Alarms echoed through the passageways, a sound every sailor dreaded. In the CIC, the tactical action officer had the weapons, authorized to fire in self-defense. The unidentified contact was now a menacing red triangle, inside their warning ring, not responding to hails. Unknown intentions were always assumed hostile. The flashing lights, radio chatter, and urgent voices created sensory overload. Every sailor felt the knot in their stomach. They had drilled this scenario 100 times, but this was real. A Chinese J-20 Mighty Dragon stealth fighter was screaming toward them. On the flight deck, the wind whipped across the open expanse. Deck crews worked in a controlled, frantic rhythm, exposed and on the front line. The ship's close-in weapon systems spun up, a terrifying, high-pitched whine. The last line of defense was ready. The danger was no longer distant. It was here. The CIC braced for the unknown. The bridge waited for orders. The world watched, breathless. The next seconds would decide everything. The J-20 closed in. The carrier was ready. The crisis had arrived. There was no turning back. Captain Reynolds stood on the bridge, a storm of possibilities raging in his mind. Was this a defection, a provocation, or the opening move of an attack? His officers presented the options. Commander Davis warned, this could be a trap, a Trojan horse, or a casus belli. The TAO's voice was tense. Sir, he's not responding. Hostile, non-communicating aircraft inside our vital area. Rules of engagement are clear. To shoot down the plane risked war. To let it get closer risked 5,000 lives. The tension was palpable. The J-20 was now inside 50 miles, unchanged in course or speed. Reynolds asked, "What's his posture?" "Negative, Captain. No fire control radar, bomb bay doors closed, flying straight and level, but showing signs of distress, unstable flight path, faint repeating signal on a civilian emergency frequency, a distressed pilot, or part of the deception." The captain had seconds to decide. Every option was perilous. The bridge waited for his call. The world waited for his choice. The J-20 kept coming. The crew braced for impact or revelation. Reynolds weighed the risks. The fate of the ship, and perhaps the world, hung in the balance. He gave the order: scramble the Ready Fives. The next move would define history. The crisis was now in his hands. The clock was ticking. Scramble! Scramble the Ready Fives! I want 2 Hornets in the air, now! The order echoed down to the flight deck. The Ready Fives, 2 FA-18 Super Hornets, were airborne in minutes. Pilots sprinted to their jets. Ground crews swarmed. Engines roared. The catapult fired, launching the Hornets skyward. The Super Hornets climbed, banking hard to intercept the J-20. Their radars locked onto the Chinese jet. Viper 1 radioed, "I have a visual, it's a J-20 flying erratically, looks like he's in trouble." This was the first close encounter with China's premier stealth fighter. On board the George Washington, everyone listened to the radio chatter. The ship was at general quarters, defensive systems fully active. The carrier strike group was a coiled spring ready to strike. The two Hornets flew alongside the J-20, one on each side. They were in escort position close enough to see the pilot. The next move was up to the Chinese jet. The world watched as American and Chinese pilots flew wingtip to wingtip. The tension was electric. The J-20's intentions remained a mystery. The carrier waited for the outcome. The crisis hovered in the air. "Unidentified aircraft, you are approaching a United States Navy warship. Alter course immediately." The message went out in English and Mandarin. No reply. The J-20 slowed. Landing gear dropped. A clear signal. He wanted to land. The Hornet pilot radioed. "The Bandit is lowering his gear and tailhook. He's lining up for a landing." Captain Reynolds had seconds to decide. Wave him off and risk a crash, or let him land and risk catastrophe. Tell him he is not cleared to land. Wave him off. Fire warning flares. The Hornets performed a headbutt maneuver. Fired flares. Final warnings. The J-20 pilot ignored them, committed to landing. On the carrier, the landing signal officer reported, "He's not listening. He's coming in." Reynolds ordered, "Aye. Clear the deck, prepare for emergency landing, stand by crash and salvage." The flight deck emptied. The LSO watched as the J-20 approached too fast, at a bad angle. Wave off, wave off! But it was too late. The J-20 slammed onto the deck, tailhook catching an arresting wire. Sparks flew. The jet screeched to a halt just meters from the edge. For a moment, silence. Then, crash alarms blared. Fire crews rushed in, foam sprayed. The deck a scene of controlled chaos. The J-20 sat, alien and smoking, on the American carrier. The pilot was still inside. Marines surrounded the jet, weapons ready. The world watched, stunned. The impossible had happened. The crisis had reached its climax. The next chapter was about to begin. The carrier braced for what came next. The moment the J-20 screeched to a halt, the flight deck erupted in controlled chaos. Fire crews and Marines surrounded the jet, weapons trained on the cockpit. The pilot hadn't moved. Was he injured, hostile, or the plane rigged to explode? EOD teams inspected the jet for sabotage. The captain's order, "Secure the pilot, non-lethal force only." The canopy was opened. The pilot, young and terrified, was helped out. He didn't resist as Marines escorted him below deck to the brig. The first part of the drama was over. The pilot was secure. Now the focus shifted to the jet, an intelligence goldmine. The J-20 was China's answer to the F-22 and F-35. The US had spent billions trying to understand it. Now, one had landed in their lap. Intelligence teams began examining the aircraft. Inside the cockpit, they found a hardened case with a data drive. The pilot, before being taken away, said one word: defect. This was not just a pilot. This was a defector. And he had brought a gift. The carrier's fortune had changed in an instant. The world's balance had shifted. The crisis was far from over. The stakes had just been raised. The news reached Beijing within the hour. China issued a blistering statement accusing the US of air piracy and demanding the return of the pilot and jet. Diplomatic channels lit up worldwide. In the South China Sea, two Chinese destroyers broke formation, moving aggressively toward the USS George Washington. The American carrier group tightened formation, ready for a standoff. The USS Decatur moved to shield the carrier. It was a high-stakes game of chicken with billion-dollar warships. On the George Washington's bridge, the mood was tense. The crew raced to move the J-20 off the flight deck and into the hangar. A fighter jet stuck on deck made the carrier a sitting duck. Sailors worked quickly, towing the black jet toward the elevator. Every eye watched the Chinese destroyers closing in. The radio crackled with urgent demands from the Chinese warships. The American response: "We are in international waters, conducting routine operations." But everyone knew this was anything but routine. The standoff was on. The world watched, waiting for the next move. The crisis was escalating. The J-20 was secured in the hangar bay, hidden from prying eyes. In Washington, the president and advisors debated the data drive's authenticity. Was the pilot a genuine defector, or was this a Chinese plot? The data could be a goldmine, or a poison pill. The CIA urged caution. The Pentagon pushed for action. The world watched, holding its breath. The United Nations called for restraint. Allies pleaded for calm. Markets wobbled. The incident was the lead story everywhere. The USS George Washington remained on station, a lonely outpost in a sea of tension. Chinese destroyers circled, the standoff a microcosm of global power struggle. As the sun set, nothing was resolved. The pilot was in U.S. custody, the J-20 in a U.S. hangar, the data drive a Pandora's box. Captain Reynolds looked out at the dark water, wondering if he'd averted disaster or created a crisis. The world waited for the next move. The aftershocks were just beginning.